everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm finally bringing you my July wrap-up. In July, somehow, and I have no idea how, I read a lot of books. The first half of July I was traveling and recovering from my very bad jet lag and time difference, but still I managed to read a lot, and since I have so many books to go through, let's just get on with it. First book that I read in the month of July was Legendary by Stephanie Garber, and this is the sequel to Caraval. Caraval series, and apparently we're getting third book, and I expected it to be only a duology, is a young adult fantasy series that focuses on two girls, sisters, Scarlet and Donatella, both of whom have to participate in Caraval, which is like a magical event full of mischief and lies and basically contests, and there is like a secret. There's a lot of stuff happening. So I listened to Legendary in audio, the same thing that I did with Caraval, and when I listened to Caraval, I was hugely disappointed by the plot, by how simplistic it was, how prominent the romance line was, and I just felt that it was so heavily focused on romance as opposed to the fact that Scarlet has to save her sister Donatella. That is the plot of Caraval. But when I learned that the second book will be focusing on Donatella, Scarlet's sister, in Legendary, I even considered not picking up the sequel. The reason being because even though I liked Scarlet more or less, I hated Donatella and what she did to Scarlet. And what happened at the end of Caraval made me think that there is nothing that Donatella can do to redeem herself in my eyes, and maybe even in the eyes of her sister. There was just some things that happened at the end of Caraval that went just against everything that I like and I believe in, if it makes any sense. So I even considered not picking up Legendary at all. But then at some point I realized that I really wanted to listen to another audiobook, and I wanted it to be a fantasy book, and I also really like Rebecca Solera's narration, so I was like, okay, I'll give it a go. So I picked it up, and truthfully, I think that Stephanie Garber's writing did improve from her first book. I think this writing is more solid. However, she just goes over the top with the different comparisons and similes and metaphors. It seems like pretty much on every single page you can find something that is like, and her dress was made out of dark blue silk and midnight dreams. Like, seriously, how many of those comparisons can be? I'm pretty sure if I open the book on any page, I will be able to find something similar. Another thing which I did not like in the plot of this book was that Donatella was consistently being paired with and thrown towards a very evil character, like a very, not just like bad boy trope, but really bad character. And even though she knew that he was bad and he kept thinking about how bad he was and how much she hated him and despised him, she still felt drawn to him. It's just, it felt really unnatural and it felt really twisted. I did not like it. Overall, I give this book the same rating I gave Caraval, that is 3 stars. I think Rebecca Solera's narration is great. The plot is slightly better in this book, but still, I was just rolling my eyes so much. The only good point is that my favorite character was in this book, and I liked it. And whatever happened to that character, I did enjoy. But the rest of it was just really meh. I think that Donatella in this book very differs from Donatella in Caraval. Which, I don't know, it almost feels as if Caraval, since it was told from Scarlet's perspective, was almost like an unreliable narrative, because it feels as if Scarlet's perception of Donatella is very different from what Donatella is in reality, and even what she is as a character as Stephanie Garber writes her. So that was kind of confusing. Anyway, give it 3 stars. Not a huge fan, so cannot really recommend, I'm sorry. The stunning cover though, and the first book has a stunning cover, so it's definitely a very beautiful book, and it's beautifully formatted. Yeah, I just wish the plot was better and writing was better too. Next, I wanted to read some manga, so based on some of the fellow book bloggers' recommendations, I picked up Orange. So this is complete collection, and I read both volumes 1 and 2. I just have already returned volume number 1 to the library, so I'm only holding volume number 2. This is a complete series, and this is, I would probably call it young adult sci-fi manga. This is a story about a girl who is in 11th grade, and she receives a letter from herself from 10 years in the future. And in that letter, she reads that there is going to be a transfer student who will join their class, and that she's basically asking her old self in the 11th grade to keep an eye on this boy and to befriend him. There's a whole group of friends, as you can tell from the cover, and they all welcome this new boy into their group, and this is basically the story of how this girl is dealing with the fact that there is a letter that has step-by-step instructions of what she has to do to keep this boy. And there are a lot of interesting things in this manga. I think this is the very first manga that I read that has a more realistic relationship between boys and girls, in the sense that whenever I read manga, I always feel that just due to the cultural aspect of it, there is a huge distance between boys and girls, and very often girls are portrayed as weak, and they also are mostly mistreated by boys, especially if there are feelings involved, and there are not that many close friendships in manga. This is just my perception and my opinion. However, this manga proved me wrong. I loved the story of this group of friends. They're all really close. They all stand for each other, and it's just so good. And even this sci-fi aspect of the story kept me really hooked. I couldn't really tell where the story was going, and by the end of the second volume, when I was so invested in the lives of those kids, I felt like, oh my god, I cannot believe this is actually going in the way it's going. And I loved the ending. I think it's a very well written manga. It's very interesting. I kind of read through it in just like a day or two, like through both volumes, and you can see that they're kind of chunky, and I really enjoyed it. The drawing style is fairly simplistic. There's really not much to it. It's very plain. I like it, but I think the story and the way the characters are portrayed and their close relationships is what drew me to this manga in the first place. I'm very happy that I picked it up. I'm not a huge fan of school life, slice of life type of thing, because usually I find it a bit boring, but still I enjoyed this manga, and I gave it 4 stars to both volumes. And there's also a sequel coming out, and I have already put it on hold at my local library, and I cannot wait to see where this story progresses from this point, even though you can pretty much read these 2 volumes, the complete collections, and kind of be done with it, but I definitely want to know more about those characters. Next, I picked up a graphic novel that I saw at TCAF being sold, and I didn't pick up my own copy, and now I regret it. And this is The Witch Boy by Molly Knox Ostertag, and this is printed by Scholastic. This is a new release of 2018, and this is volume number 1. I was very happy to find out that there is actually a sequel coming out later this year, and this made me really happy, even though this can be read as a standalone in my opinion. This is the story about the boy named Astor, and everyone in his family has magic, himself included. However, there is a catch. Only girls are allowed to learn witchcraft, and all of the boys are supposed to find their spirits and learn how to shapeshift. Astor, however, does not want to shapeshift. He has trouble finding his mystical beast, so to say, and all he wants to do is to do witchcraft, but he's not allowed to. So in the story, Astor has to deal not only with prejudice and misunderstanding from his parents and his relatives that he wants to learn witchcraft. Boys make fun out of him, girls make fun out of him, but at the same time, some of his cousins and brothers start to disappear, and turns out that he is the only one who can help. And this is basically the story of it. I loved this book. It is so heartwarming. It's full with diverse characters, and just Aster himself is so adorable, and the fact that he wants to learn witchcraft and how he spies on girls, how he wants to learn that is just so freaking adorable. I loved the style of the book. I loved everything about it. I gave it 4.5 stars, like 5 stars. Really adored it, and now I really regret the fact that I did not pick up my own copy. Hopefully I will be able to do it next time Molly comes to TCAF. And here's a little tidbit if you do not know. Molly Knox Ostertag is dating Noelle Stevenson, who is the author of Nimona. Although I must admit that whoever dates who is actually non-concern of mine, but I just felt that it's very cool. Plus, I had a feeling as if their drawing styles are somewhat similar, and they also focus on a lot of diversity and kind of being true to yourself. This is a very common theme in both this book and Nimona, and I love it. I don't know, I love Nimona, and I love Nimona as a graphic novel, and I love Nimona as an audiobook, and I love this, The Witch Boy. I cannot wait to read the second part. So yeah, definitely, I give it like 4 stars, 4.5 stars. There wasn't really much that I can comment on in terms of the story, but I really enjoyed it. I think it was well done. It's absolutely adorable. It's just, I'm all for Aster. And yeah. Next, because my brain cannot compute just reading one genre, I have to read like multiple genres at the same time. I read 3 gay romances in a quick sequence. Some of them were good, some of them were not bad. Like, they were okay. I think pretty much all of them 3 stars, except for one. I think I gave one 3.5 stars. All the links will be down below as well. Overall, July was not only a very successful reading month, I think I gave most of the books that I read at least 4 stars or 3.5. Plus, I read really across different genres. So we have already covered YA fantasy, we covered gay romances, and we covered middle grade graphic novels. And the next book that I read that month was Fortunately the Milk by Neil Gaiman and illustrated by Scotty Young. This is an absolutely adorable story. I adored it. I think it's more of a middle grade, as a matter of fact, because there's still text in it. So this is an absolutely adorable book. The story is about 2 kids who are being given breakfast by their father, and turns out that they ran out of milk. So their father leaves the house to get some milk, and the kids are just staying there going like, oh, he has been gone for such a long time. And then the father comes back and tells his kids the story about how he went to get milk and then was abducted by aliens, and everything else that happened in between him getting the milk and getting home. This is both very typical Neil Gaiman story. There is a lot of humor in it. There is a bit of randomness and weirdness, and I absolutely loved it. I think the illustrations by Scotty Young were absolutely on point. There are pirates in this book, there are aliens, there are dinosaurs, there are ponies, there are erupting volcanoes. Like, there's a lot of weird stuff happening in this book, but it's super adorable. I loved it. I read it in one sitting on one of the weekends mornings, I think, and it was super adorable. I gave it 4.5 stars. I could have read the whole book just about this dad's adventures, and this also reminded me of how my dad, when I was little, tried to persuade me to eat, and he would also tell me different stories, but not as elaborate as these ones. But absolutely adorable. I loved it, and if you have any kids of the applicable age, I highly recommend you check this book out if you haven't already. I liked it so much that I even made like an illustration myself in my art journal, and yeah, it was just super adorable. I loved this book so much. It just everything about it was freaking adorable. Maybe one day I'll have my own copy because I can totally see myself reading this book again. Such a fun and easy read. Okay, I feel as if I'm not going fast enough through books. I need to increase my speed because I have a lot of books to talk about. Still a lot of books. Next book that I read was The Hazelwood by Melissa Albert, and the book that I'm holding is actually an Owl Crate exclusive edition. It is different in color and has some stickers inside, letter from the author, and I think it's signed by the author too. So I got this book from the Owl Crate subscription box, but never got around to reading it until recently. And as a matter of fact, after listening to Legendary by Rebecca Soler, I was like, I really want to listen to some more of her books. I mean, narrated by her. So I picked up The Hazelwood, and I'm kind of both happy that I picked it up in audio and also disappointed. And the reason being because this book turned out to be not exactly what I expected it to be. So this is a young adult fantasy series, and I believe this is Melissa Albert's debut novel. The main protagonist of this book, Alice Proserpine, is always on the go somewhere with her mother. They always move from one place to another, even though they do have a grandmother who is a well-known writer who wrote a series of very dark and scary fairy tales, and she's very popular for it. And their grandmother has a huge house, an estate, which is called the Hazelwood. However, her mother and Alice herself travel from one place to another. Her mother refuses to get any aid or any help from her own mother. So they just move from place to place, and then once at some of the places where they stay, Alice's mother disappears. And Alice is led to believe that she didn't just disappear, that she was captured by those creatures that her grandmother depicted in her fairy tales. So this is the general plot of the book. When I read the synopsis of this book, I felt that this might be a very interesting, dark, suspenseful fairy tale urban fantasy book. But I was very let down, and the reason being because the major part of this book takes place in the human contemporary world. Nothing to do with the fairy tales. They're always somewhere in the background, but it does not really take place anywhere but in our real world. And yes, we have Alice that has to deal with a lot of things, and we also have her friend Finch, who helps her along the way. There are a lot of things happening. There is a lot of elements of, like slight horror, thriller, suspense that I liked. However, I still felt that the book, for the most part, was very slow paced until maybe like 2/3 into the plot. And then only it picked up and we got what I was looking for and waiting for, and that is the Hazelwood itself and all that weirdness that was happening there. And I liked that part a lot. However, everything that was before that, I did not like. There is also one thing in this book that I do not know whether I read it correctly, but I was not very happy by the fact that there is only one person of color in this book, and that person does not end very well. Like, their fate is not good. So that made me cringe, especially since at some point in the book, the problem of people of color being mistreated by police is raised and is mentioned on the page. And there is a mention of this whole white privilege. But then Melissa goes and does a bad thing to that only character of color. And I don't know how I feel about it. I felt that the book was well written, and there are definitely certain things in this book that made me very happy. For example, different literary references to fairy tales or Greek myths or just other books that made me really happy. But I did not like Alice. Alice in many ways reminded me of Kate from The Savage Son by Victoria Schwab, because she's very unlikable and she also very fierce. She has anger management issues. I did not like her at all because of that, even though I do like Kate in The Savage Son. I did like Finch. Finch was my favorite, but that's a whole different discussion. So yeah, there were a lot of things in this plot which I felt were just very slow, and the introduction of Otherworld should have been done way sooner. Well, don't get me wrong, the introduction and the mention is there almost from the very first page, but it should have, everything should have happened sooner. That's my pet peeve with this book. I gave it 3 stars. Unfortunately, I was really disappointed to the point that I'm thinking about, getting rid of my own copy. I listened to it in audio, and I think I would continue listening to the sequel in audio as well, because I like Rebecca Soleri's narration. And I was proven more than once that if I'm not enjoying the book, but the audiobook's narrator is great, I can definitely get through the book. It's just, I was not a huge fan of this one. Maybe I will leave it to rest and I'll think about it later, but unfortunately I gave this book only 3 stars. We're almost there. I swear, we're almost there. Next, I read a graphic novel that I checked out on Overdrive, and it has a very weird title, which is called Everyone is an Alien When You're an Alien Too, a book by Johnny's son. So I was not aware of Johnny's son or his cartoons on Twitter. I went into that book completely blind. I just saw it mentioned several times, and I actually saw it at Indigo bookstore. I was like, oh, I might as well check it out on Overdrive. And this is basically a collection of all of his doodles that he posted on Twitter, and the main message is that there is this alien who gets sent to Earth and then just meets different creatures and kind of makes friends, etc., etc. I did not like that book. I, for the most part, found the misspellings and all of those abbreviations very annoying. I know that it was supposed to be intentional. It's supposed to look like that. It's supposed to be like that. It's kind of like making fun of pop culture. I don't even know, but I did not like it. I felt that distracted me a lot. I did like the ideas behind those little images, and some of them were very sweet and touching. Some of them were very poignant, but some were just plain boring, or just I didn't feel anything when I was reading that book. Mostly, like I said, I was being annoyed by misspellings. This is something that I can not really handle well when I see it, because I keep getting focused on it. So I gave this book like 2.5, 3 stars at most. Was not a huge fan. I guess if I were prepared for what it's supposed to be, and I was not. I was like, I just want to check out what everyone else is reading, and I was kind of disappointed, so here's that. Next, I picked up another book by Neil Gaiman, and this is Norse Mythology. I mentioned it several times that I have a very difficult relationship with Neil Gaiman's writing. There are certain books that I absolutely love, and there are certain books that I absolutely hate. And thankfully this one falls into the like category. So Norse Mythology is exactly what it says on the tin. This is the retelling, or rather just telling, of Norse Mythology by Neil Gaiman. Obviously there is a bit of creative license, so to say, in place here, because at the very beginning, in the introduction, Neil Gaiman does say that he read a lot of books, he was inspired, he wanted to share his love for Norse mythology with others. So this is what he did. He writes about Thor, Loki, Odin, and the whole pantheon of Norse gods. If you watched any of Marvel movies about Thor, you will probably enjoy this book a lot. Obviously, I cannot compare movies, which are like complete fiction, to actual mythology, which has like roots in ancient literature, but I want to say that this is a very entertaining book. It's not a very big book. I read it just like in a day or two. I found it very entertaining. Neil Gaiman does do a very good job with just, you know, putting in little jokes here and there. And it's definitely way more dark than you would think it would be. I studied mythology at university, so I did read all of those myths way like years ago, but for me it was a very nice thing to kind of go back into Norse mythology and remind myself and remember everything that I obviously have forgotten. There are a lot of little tidbits that I actually enjoyed, some of which I couldn't even remember, but it was a very enjoyable read. I think for something which is probably mostly dry and uninteresting, so to say, unless you are specifically interested in mythology, this is a very good opportunity to learn about this particular pantheon of gods. So I give this book 4 stars, well, mostly because, I mean, it's still mythology. It's not like I'm being given fan fiction based on Thor or anything like it, but it was very entertaining. Oh god, I cannot believe I read so many books in July. It's scary. Next, I have another picture book, and this is Instructions by Neil Gaiman, illustrated by Charles Vess. And essentially, this is a very short picture book about how to get into the fantasy fairy tale world, how you have to open the door and follow the path, and there are different mentions of different fairy tales, especially Brothers Grimm fairy tales, obviously with a twist, because this is Neil Gaiman. He cannot do just simple books and simple stories. I loved the artwork and I loved this short story, and most importantly, I just love the fact that at the very beginning it is devoted to Ellen Kushner and Delia Sherman, who are one of my 2 favorite fantasy authors, like old fantasy authors, and I just felt that it was very nice and very, you know, touching that he devoted this book to them, and I just loved it. I gave it 4 stars, like absolutely adorable. Why 4 stars? Because I could have read once again the whole book just like that, and illustrations are absolutely great. I love them. Yeah, I mean, look at this. Super cool. Definitely I recommend if you have any children who love fairy tales, they'll probably enjoy this book. Oh god, I'm so tired of talking, and I've been talking for a very long time. On the topic of Neil Gaiman, you can see the trend here. I picked up The Sinful Bones by Sean Tan, and there is an introduction or a foreword by Neil Gaiman. So this book attracted me at Indigo Bookstore because I saw the cover and it was like, is this a fox on the top of a skull? I need to read it. So I picked it up without actually knowing what it was, and turns out that it's almost like an art book, because here we have different pictures of different sculptures by Sean Tan, and he is an Australian artist and sculptor, and he did the whole series of sculptures based on characters from Brothers Grimm fairy tales. And here you can see the images and hear a little snippet from each fairy tale that he based characters or took characters from, and I loved these little, oh my god, this is both creepy and adorable, and I'm not even surprised that there is a foreword by Neil Gaiman. There is also a foreword by someone, let me tell you who, Jack Zipes or Zipes, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, but Neil Gaiman put in an absolutely amazing foreword in which he said one of the things that I actually highlighted, and I put a quote on my blog, and he said, "People need stories. It's one of the things that make us who we are. We crave stories because they make us more than ourselves. They give us escape and they give us knowledge." And I think this is the perfect explanation why people write stories and why people consume stories. This is an absolutely gorgeous, look at this. This is a fox, and yes, there are a couple of foxes in here. So this is a gorgeous book. If you love Brothers Grimm fairy tales, and if you like unconventional art and something creepy, you'll definitely enjoy this book. I give this book also like 4 or 5 stars. Absolutely adored it. Not something that I'll probably own myself, but definitely something very entertaining and very imaginative, because the way that he created those little sculptures was just fantastic. I enjoyed it a lot, and I'm right now in a very big fairy tale mood, and I really want to reread Brother Grimm's fairy tales. One of the things that people do not realize unless they study literature is that Brothers Grimm fairy tales are not fun at all. They're actually not, or rather were not, originally meant for kids. They were just the collections of folklore collected by Brothers Grimm. They were meant to be like a philology linguistics project as opposed to just a book for children's. So when I read some of those Brother Grimm fairy tales in their original text at university, I was shocked by how dark they are and how scary and sometimes like really terrifying can be. But I did enjoy them, and now I'm thinking about it and go like, yeah, I might actually pick them up again. I had this idea for a very long time to pick up some of the Brothers Grimm fairy tales and kind of do my own retellings, but I haven't done that yet. But I still have this idea somewhere at the back of my mind, so I need to pick up my own copy of the Brothers Grimm's complete collection of fairy tales in their original text, which I have not done yet, but I hope to do it very soon. So yeah, I really enjoy this book, and I do recommend it to everyone. Okay, this is the 3rd clip I'm filming, and I have 2 books left. I cannot believe how many books I read in July. This is, I mean, it's amazing, but it's really hard to do wrap up because I need to talk about every single book, and I don't know how to make this video less than an hour long. Okay. Next, I read the collection of short stories, and this is all out. The No Longer Secret Stories of Queer Teens Throughout the Ages. This is the anthology, so it has different stories by different authors, but it is edited by Sandra Mitchell. Once again, this is exactly what it says on the tin, and this is the collection of short fiction of about different queer characters throughout the ages. So we have some pieces of historical fiction, of not so historical fiction, some fantasy stories, some more like horror stories, and they're all delightful. But I'm probably gonna butcher a lot of names here, but I just want to say that there were stories by some authors that I have never read before, so that was a very lovely introduction to their writing style. For example, Natalie C. Parker, and she's the author of Seafire, young adult fantasy novel, which I'm reading right now. There is a story by Mackenzie Lee that I absolutely adored, and I cannot wait to read her books. There is a story by Dahlia Adler, which was also the first time I ever read her story. There is a story of Elliot Wake, which blew me away, and now I'm pissed that there are no books by Elliot like from recent times. There are some like older ones. There is a story by Scott Tracy, which I absolutely adored, and I cannot wait to read some of his longer stuff. There is a story from Tess Sharp, same thing. Alex Sanchez, same thing, loved it. Tessa Gretton too. Sean David Hutchinson blew me away. Also was the first time when I read one of his his writing, and just I want to say that this is an amazing collection of queer fiction, and this is a young adult, obviously teen fiction, and this book just should be read by everyone, to be honest. They're all short stories. They serve as a great introduction to different writing styles, and I just adored it. I gave it overall rating of 4 stars. I would say probably there were some of the stories which I did not like, or not so much as disliked, but more like I felt meh about the characters and the plot. But at least half of those stories were very good. I really enjoyed them, and it was such an easy read. I kept reading those stories in between reading other books, and I felt that it was just very entertaining, and I just enjoyed myself a lot. So definitely recommend, if you like any queer representation, this is the book for you. Yes, 4 stars. The last but definitely not least was the book that I received from Penguin Random House. I requested this book for review, and this is The Saturday Night Ghost Club by Craig Davidson. I have not heard of Craig Davidson before, but when I saw this book, especially the cover, which looks as if it's an old book with, first of all, there are deckled edges, but also it looks as if the cover has some like signs of wear, but as a matter of fact, this is a new book, and it just looks, and it made look as if it's an old book, and I absolutely love the cover and this whole like 60s, 70s feel to it. This is technically not young adult or even middle grade, but more like literary fiction, and it's told in the first point of view of this character who's now an adult, and basically he remembers things that happened to him back in a day in 80s. This book is set in Niagara Falls, Ontario. It's set in Canada. It's written by Canadian author, and that was what attracted me to this book. And then I picked it up and I started reading, and I could not put it down. I might actually do a whole separate video about this book because I want to talk about it, but I just want to say that it's a very interesting story. This is definitely coming of age type of story, and there is a lot of nostalgia for old days, small towns, but there's just a lot of cool things in this book, and I love the characters. I liked the narration style. I liked that the fact that the main protagonist, who is an adult now and remembers his childhood, is a brain scientist, and there are a lot of mentions of the brain and how brain works and how what he sees in patients and what he deals with, for example, diagnoses someone with a brain tumor, how that affects people, and also how that knowledge reflects on his memories of his childhood and everything that happened there. I loved that story so much. I could not put this book down. It's fairly short. It's only like, what, 300 pages? Yeah, even less than that. But I enjoyed this book a lot. It's well written. I have already ordered other books by Craig Davidson from the library, and I cannot wait to read them. I think they there was suspense, like thrilling aspect to the story, and I think it was done really well. This book is coming out on August 14th. I'm not sure when my wrap-up will be up, but I will definitely try to post my book review, the full review of this book, either in video or text format on my channel or my blog before or on the day of release. So whenever this video comes out, you will be able to read the full review of this book. And I love this book so much. I just gave it like 4.5 stars. It was so well written. I just loved that story. It gave me also the feeling of nostalgia, even though I was not brought up in Ontario or Niagara Falls or anything like that, but I just felt so nostalgic. And there, even though there were thrilling and kind of scary aspects of the story, I also felt that it was almost a cozy read, if it makes any sense. It's very well written. I highly recommend it if this is something that you might be interested in. I would not call it middle grade because it's not targeted towards children, and maybe young adults would not find it as thrilling as I did. It's definitely an adult book. However, since the main protagonist is a teenager and even younger than that, it's definitely something that might be interested for, like, say, older teens or maybe someone in their 20s. But either way, it's just a lovely read. I do recommend it, and just the whole topic of brains and how complicated brains are is just so freaking fascinating. So I definitely recommend you check this book out, and I'm also super grateful to Penguin Random House for sending me this copy for review. I know that I requested it myself, but I just so happy that I picked it up. And I almost never do this, but I got this book in mail and basically started reading it the same day, and I'm just so happy I read it. It was so good. Right, believe it or not, but we are at the end of this wrap up. Maybe now you realize why I was so hesitant to film it, because I read, let's see how many books I read. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I read 15 books in July. Well, some of them were children's books and basically graphic novels, but still 15. I haven't had a successful month like that since probably 2017 or maybe even before that, but hell yeah, that was an amazing reading month, I must tell you. So kudos to those who are still watching this. Thank you very much, I do appreciate it. As always, all the links to all the books that I read will be down below in the description box. Please let me know if you read any of the books that I mentioned or if you plan to read any of the books that I mentioned. I would love to know. But that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you very soon. Bye! How do I even still have voice? Where is my soda? I usually do not drink soda, but if I have to, this will probably be my choice. At least it's cane sugar. That's the small price, but I need sugar because everything hurts. Yeah. And now I need more sugar or more painkillers or maybe more sleep or maybe all three. I'm not sure, but I just need something. Probably sleep. Okay, bye!